welcome to the First Right Podcast, a weekly conservative news show brought to you by Restoration of America. I'm your host, Jerry Ewalt, Chief Marketing Officer for Restoration of America. And today we are blessed to have Sean Parnell, a highly decorated military warrior and best-selling author. Sean also lives in Pennsylvania and was briefly a U.S. Senate candidate there. So he has some great insight for us on the shocking results we saw in our midterms. Sean, it's a real honor to have you on the show today. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I have to say it right off the bat, thank you for your service and thank you for all the stuff that you continue to do for veterans today. And so I think the audience would just love a quick thumbnail of your amazing career and maybe some of the stuff you're doing today. Before we jump into politics, let's start with that.
Oh, thanks. I served in combat in Afghanistan in 2006. My platoon served all along the Afghan-Pakistan border. We were there for 485 days, hundreds of direct fire engagements. Some of my men were wounded twice. I think one of my guys was wounded 3 times. Overall, my platoon took some like 85% casualty rate. I was wounded myself. I had a head injury, which is probably why I got involved in politics in the first place. But I served in combat, came home, got my master's degree, and was blessed to start working with a veterans charity that I co-founded, and we give service dogs to veterans, and we've been doing that for, almost like over 10 years now, and it's like given 300 dogs. So, I always say to people that, the pathway to a meaningful life is through service to others. And, I feel like we've been, the American Warrior Initiative, my charity, has been walking the walk for quite some time now.
Yeah, no. And I was reading through your bio, obviously. So this outlaw platoon that you were part of,
yeah.
I think I was reading 80% of your platoon received Purple Hearts, yourself included. I know that. I mean, truly amazing what you've done for this country. And we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. You're worth it. This country's worth it. I volunteered to serve, and I would do it all over again. And it, despite how terrible combat is, this country's worth it. It's the greatest country on the face of the planet, and it was an honor to have the opportunity to serve.
Yeah, amen to that. And you're not done serving. You have a long battle ahead of you, and so do all of us right now. So
Yes.
I know what you went through was insane. But I would say it's insane what we're going through right now, just in a very different way. Not to take anything away what you've accomplished, but it's insane. So thank you for continuing the battle.
It's a different type of battlefield, but it's just as important in so many ways. And yeah, we're in the fight, and we've got a long road ahead of us, but the future is bright and optimistic. That much I can tell you.
I agree. And so we got Pennsylvania, the birthplace of a great nation, and I know you're right in the heart of it there in Pittsburgh, and so you know Pennsylvania very, very well. And especially politics as well. And it's at the center of the political universe as always. Now that in Arizona right now. But So tell us a little bit about the demographics, right? So birthplace of a nation, but it does represent a lot of what we see across the country. So tell me a little bit about the demographics in Pennsylvania.
Well, Pennsylvania, you're right, is at the center of the political universe. It's critically important. And if you look at how Ron DeSantis and the Republicans performed in Florida this cycle, it certainly seems like Florida is off the board for the Democrats going into 2024, right? I think it's the first time since the 1800s that no Democrat in Florida has held a statewide office. So kudos to Governor DeSantis and the great work that he and his team have done down there to turn that state from really purple just a few years ago to deep crimson red. And so that said, the focus is, I think, on Pennsylvania moving into 2024. And if you look at just voter registrations, we can start there. It's a tough state for Republicans. It's not impossible for Republicans to win. You need the right kind of a candidate that can bring people together. But if you look at just voter registrations, there are over 530,000 more registered Democrats than there are Republicans. So a Democrat can win this state without a single Republican vote, right? And so that's why independents in the state of Pennsylvania, people that are right there in the middle, become so critically important, right? And there are over 1.2 million independents in this state. So it's you've got a little bit of everything here in Pennsylvania. You've got, college educated, you've got working class people, you've got conservative Democrats, all, packed in Western Pennsylvania, who are pro-life, pro-gun Democrats that have been voting, that are just like union guys, believe the Democrat Party protects the little guy. And I think certainly that's not the case anymore. But you've got an interesting mix here. And Pennsylvania moving into 2024 is going to be the battleground of all battlegrounds. That much is for sure.
Yeah, I agree. We're not giving up. We're not giving up hope there for sure. And if we look at this election, it was a big disappointment, right? There's no doubt about that. And
sure.
I'd love your opinion on these. And let's start with the Senate race, because after watching Fetterman debate against Oz, I mean, I think everyone thought it would be a slam dunk. I mean, it was such a poor performance on Fetterman, and yet he won decisively in the Senate race. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, that debate performance, it was late in the game, a week before Election Day. That was a calculated decision by the Fetterman campaign. Why? Because in the state of Pennsylvania, people have been early voting for almost 2 months prior to that. So the Fetterman campaign's goal was to bank as many votes as humanly possible prior to that debate performance, because as you saw, as I saw, as I think all of America saw, Fetterman he wasn't there. He couldn't string two sentences together. And I'm not saying that like as an insult. I mean, clearly we want him to make a full recovery, but that does not mean, that he can serve 6 years in the Senate. So I think the debate performance almost lulled people into a false sense of security, like, hey, Republicans got this. But the fact of the matter is the Democrats have mastered the game here in Pennsylvania of the mail-in ballot system and the early voting system here in Pennsylvania, and used that to their advantage. And I think even with still 98% reporting, last I checked, the margin in Pennsylvania was 238,000 that Oz lost by. And so it's a larger discussion about the differences between how Republicans focus on running campaigns and how Democrats focus on elections, and the difference between an actual voter and a ballot. Both of those two things elicit the same result on Election Day, but one of those things is far more difficult to control. So if you look at voters, for example, you have to make the case to them. You have to sway public sentiment. You have to debate. You have to get up on TV. You have to door knock in the hopes that when they show up to vote on Election Day, they pull the lever for you. On the other hand, if you focus on ballots, well, it's just a numbers game. You look at a spreadsheet, you've got access to Pennsylvania's electronic voter registry database. You can see, like, okay, look at all the people that opted into the mail-in ballot program in 2020. By the way, the highest presidential turnout election in our nation's history. You look at all the people who automatically opted in 2020, and you say, okay, look, Biden got 60% in Allegheny County. It's a critical county for us. Let's see if we as the Fetterman campaign can get 64, 65. And that means going to Democrats' houses, seeing if we can get them a mail-in ballot, seeing if we can get them into the automatic opt-in program. And that ultimately was why John Fetterman was able to increase his margins in critical counties in Pennsylvania, like Allegheny County, like Montgomery County, like Delaware County. He was able to increase his margins there over what Biden got in 2020. And unfortunately, Oz, even from the very beginning, Dr. Oz has had a base problem in Pennsylvania. The idea that his conservative bona fides in this state, he didn't make the case well enough to the base. And unfortunately, Dr. Oz underperformed in areas like in central Pennsylvania where President Trump ran up the score in 2016 and 2020. So that was sort of the perfect storm, a bad storm for Dr. Oz, but really the perfect conditions for John Fetterman, and ultimately why he won the race.
Yeah, I mean, it seems hard to believe, and I think what you're trying to break down for us is there's a couple things going on here. The candidate himself being able to establish himself as being that conservative candidate, someone who was really part of Pennsylvania and not maybe some other states, is one of them. And then you have the whole issue with the way Republicans are voting. it's not necessarily an issue, but they're limiting themselves to maybe same day voting in person, which I know we've been saying, let's do that. That's the best way to do it. But there were so many problems when that happened, whereas we saw Democrats vote early and throughout the cycle through mail-in, all legal, by the way, they got it done earlier. And so there were some issues. And we saw a lot of that happening, by the way, in Arizona. That was a big part of why it took so long for Arizona to get counted and all the issues that they had in there.
Well, exactly. I mean, look, Republicans vote on election day. That's what we've historically done here over the last couple of cycles. But I think statewide, Republicans going into election day were already down by 600,000 votes. I mean, that's indeed it was in 2022, an insurmountable mountain to climb. I mean, and so the Republican path moving forward needs to be an adoption of we need to play the game better than Democrats do. And I know that Republicans don't like mail-in voting. I opposed Act 77, which is Pennsylvania's no excuse absentee ballot law. I had a case up at the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. I had two cases at the Supreme Court on it. Unfortunately, Act 77 is the law of the land, right as of right now. The only way we change that law is if we win, take back power, and then proceed with election reform. But the reality is we have to see the political battlefield as the way that it is, not as the way that we'd like it to be. And so that means getting access to the electronic voter registry database, finding what we call low proposition, one of four Republican voters. So one of four means like Republican voter, a reliably Republican voter who might vote in one out of every 4 election cycles. I think we have to find those people, right? We have to get them to opt into the mail-in ballot program, and we have to bank their early vote. So that will help us offset the Democrat advantage going into election day, been piling up early votes and mail-in votes going into election day so that hill isn't so tall to climb. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I'm hearing a lot about that, and you're sharing with us that Republicans need to play chess and stop playing checkers, right? Because we were so excited about the midterms. Biden's doing such a terrible job. Look at all the insanity going on in our country. We've got this. We're going to win this. And sure, I mean, there was a lot of money spent, and we try to activate the base, and you do all those kind of things. But again, not being strategic and understanding, we may not like the rules on how voting happens, and we'd love to change them at some point, but those are the rules. So play within the rules. Don't narrow yourself just down to that one day type of concept. So.
Right. And I don't want to, I want to clarify as well, like Dr. Oz worked his butt off. It's really easy to look at what happened and, be a Monday morning quarterback. And when all the dust settles, have a lot of opinions. I've been the candidate both for Congress and for Senate. Like when you're in it, you're in it, and it's difficult to see through the haze all around you. It's chaotic. You're doing 5 or 6 events a day. And you hope that on election day, you're victorious by having the right strategy. And so, kudos to him for sort of leaving it all on the field.
Yeah.
But as a party moving forward, we have to be better. And, I've always said, since I got into politics, Republicans focus on campaigns, Democrats focus on elections. I think the path forward for Republicans in this state and probably countrywide is focus on running great campaigns, but we also have to focus on elections, the structure, the system, the game.
Yeah. No, you're right on. And I think for Dr. Oz, if only Oprah would have supported him, I think it would have been a different story.
that endorsement, when that endorsement came out, what the first thing, I think that said more about her character than anything about Dr. Oz. So I'm thinking like, okay, so you said that you would have voted for John Fetterman a long time ago. What about the 20 years that you had Dr. Oz on your program saying he was the best thing since sliced bread? Were you lying then, or are you lying now?
I couldn't agree with you more. And Dr. Oz was a consummate professional, didn't attack Oprah in any way, said they're still good friends. And I agree. I mean, but what this is just what we expect anyway. But I did find that very interesting.
Right.
So
yeah, ridiculous.
All right.
Ridiculous.
So let's switch over to the governor's race. and take a look at that, because I know we knew that one was going to be close, and we always saw Josh Shapiro maybe ahead of Mastriano, but I don't think we were expecting it to be such a wide gap. And we had David Latour on our show right before the election, and he made some comments that he felt like that campaign that Mastriano was running was maybe not organized as well as it should have been. What are your thoughts on that governor's race?
Well, again, you look at Pennsylvania, Democrats can win without a single Republican vote. And Doug Mastriano had an extraordinary enthusiastic base. He sort of had the opposite problem of Dr. Oz. Oz was sort of a man without a base from the time he got in the race until well past Election Day. Mastriano was a man with an incredibly passionate base, but at the end of the day, he wasn't able to communicate a message that was able to sway enough independents into his corner. And again, he had all of the same election issues that Oz had with regards to the mail-in vote, the early vote, the lackluster Republican effort to get out the early vote. So I thought that the race between Josh Shapiro and Doug Mastriano would be closer. But unfortunately, it wasn't. And yeah, I mean, what more can you say? I think he's down something like 750,000 votes with 98% reporting. And so if you look at the margin, the difference between Oz and Mastriano, you're talking about, this is a state that if you believe the math, which I do, there are 500,000 ticket splitters, people who voted for Dr. Oz that didn't vote for Doug Mastriano. Those are the people that you need to make the case to, right, in order to win as a Republican in this state. And so unfortunately, I don't think while he had a very, very enthusiastic base, I don't think that Doug was able to make the case to independents. And here's another problem, by the way. Josh Shapiro raised $30 million for that race. I think Doug Mastriano, I don't know the exact numbers, but it was something like $3 million. If you're going to be a candidate statewide in the state of Pennsylvania, we've got to be better fundraisers than that, because it's the equivalent to air power in the military. Like if you're out in the field operating and you get attacked by an overwhelming enemy force, well, they're going to overwhelm you without air power, right? That money, when you're a candidate and you raise money, it allows you to put things in the mail. And more importantly, it allows you to go up on TV and communicate your message to the masses. Josh Shapiro raised so much money in that race. He was able to run ads from the primary all the way through Election Day, not just hitting Doug Mastriano, but hitting the Republican brand. And when the Dobbs decision came out, Josh Shapiro just ratcheted up the fear. Doug Mastriano is going to take away your right to choose. He wants to control women's bodies. And it was just a slow bleed for 6 months. And if you haven't been able to raise the money as a candidate, you don't have the ability to respond on TV. And I think that's why the margin was so great in the governor's race, because unfortunately, Doug didn't have the money to compete in the race like he needed to.
Well, it's great to deep dive into a state, because what you're learning here in Pennsylvania really applies across the country. In terms of raising money, we are outspent by Democrats by magnitudes. I mean, we've seen some things 30 to 40 times higher than what the Democrats than what Republicans raise. And you're right, that hurts. And look, that's not the only reason. It's actually quite amazing to see how well candidates do with so little money coming in sometimes. But that is a problem. We need to get better at that.
I mean, look, I don't like that there's so much money in politics. I don't like it. But you're right. Republicans, for the most part, get outraised, right? When I ran for Congress, we actually outraised Connor Lamb, who was the then incumbent back in PA 17. We outraised him for a couple cycles in a row. But you know what that took? It took me on the phone. So like this is how it works when you're running for office. If you have any of your viewers out there that are thinking of running for office, this is what it takes. You've got to be on the phone 5 or 6 hours a day, every day, cold calling people asking for money. That's the pathway to success. That's how Republican candidates outraise Democrat opponents. And even when they're doing the right thing, oftentimes they don't outraise Democrat opponents, because the Democrats have this Act Blue digital fundraising platform that they've built over the last decade. And it's sort of like the Netflix of fundraising. It's like, oh, you gave to John Fetterman, you might also like to give to AOC, and with a click of a button, people are giving money. And so if you look at John Fetterman's fundraising, his unitemized fundraising, like his small dollar donors, I mean, the guy had like some sort of like over 1 million small dollar donors. And that is how you win elections, because, you know, in a federal election, you can only take a max from like $2,800 from somebody in the primary and then in the general. Right. So, but there are only so many people that can afford to give that kind of money to a Republican candidate. The key is building a movement of small dollar donors that can give you $5 every month. So if John Fetterman is getting $5 every month from 1 million people, well, he's going to have the money that he needs to get the job done on election day. And in fact, that's exactly what he did.
No, you're right on with that. We're quite behind in that level of sophistication. And again, checkers versus chess, right? That's another way to look at it. So I agree with you on that. So you got to explain something to me, Sean. So in a place like Pennsylvania and the demographics we just talked about and the importance of energy production in Pennsylvania, how does the state continue to elect these leftists that are just against energy production, going in the green direction, right? It just shocks me.
So Republicans just, here again, this is an area where Republicans, I think, fall short. They're scared to talk about the importance of energy independence for some reason. And I think it's because the whole green movement is aggressive and it's in your face. But the reality is that if diminishing emissions is something that's important to you as a voter in the state of Pennsylvania, well, then we should be embracing the natural gas revolution and Marcellus shale industry that we have here in Pennsylvania, right? So I think what it comes down to is candidates that can articulate why it's important to be energy independent from a national security standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from a moral standpoint. And what I mean by that is that, you know, when we're paying more for gas or we're paying more for our groceries, that disproportionately affects lower income and middle class families. They're the ones that get hit the most. And so I think it's about having candidates that can articulate that message to the American people about why it's important to have an all of the above energy strategy and not singularly focused on green energy that's just simply not market ready.
Yeah, no, it's that makes a lot of sense, and we're going to feel that pain in the next couple of years, no doubt. If it's not already painful now, it's going to be more painful. And I know it's great to do this deep dive that we just did, understand what went wrong, because we got to start preparing right now for 2024. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that; they're a little burnt out, and we got to do it, and we got to get ready. So I'm going to give for the last question here, Sean. I want to know. I want to move away from politics. I want to go back to something that you're really passionate about, and that's the veterans. So how could people get involved with the American Warrior Initiative that you have? Because I know that's really on your heart, and I think people need a break from politics and get back to serving community and serving the veterans right now.
I mean, that's ultimately our mission, is to serve veterans and their families. And we've also opened it up to first responders, because the reality is they put a uniform on every day. They leave their house, they kiss their wife and their kids, and they don't know if they're going to make it back. And so, people can go to the American Warrior Initiative.com, just contribute to the cause. And it costs, service dogs are expensive. I mean, they're up over $10,000, right? But we guarantee that 100% of all contributions go to causes. So we're a unique organization in that we don't have any real overhead. And so go to the website, get involved. Our veterans served us overseas. Our first responders serve us here at home, and it's our duty and responsibility as responsible American citizens to take care of them as well.
Yeah, as the economy gets harder and harder and we see more and more inflation, $10,000 for a service dog, that is a lot of money, especially for these veterans. So I agree. So thank you for doing that. And I encourage everyone to check your website out. And hey, like we talked about, pitch in $5 or whatever you can do, because it makes a big difference, and it goes a long way if we can get a lot of people involved and engaged in that.
It does for sure.
Well, Sean, this was fantastic. I really appreciate your insight, but also all your service to this great country. thanks for for the fight that you're doing, and keep it up, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting conservative media. Don't ever forget that by working together and staying diligent, we conservatives can bring our country back to true greatness. Until next week, let's all keep praying that God will continue to bless America.
First Right, a new kind of news summary without the liberal slant. Every morning, in your inbox, always free. Subscribe by texting First Right to 30161. That's First Right, all caps, one word, to 30161.